Hello friends, in this episode, I will tell you about the ancient Egyptian goddess Hathor. Don't forget to comment, subscribe and turn on notifications to support the growth of my channel. Hathor is one of the most famous goddesses of ancient Egypt. She was known as the Great One of many names, and her titles and attributes are so numerous that she was important in every area of the life and death of the ancient Egyptians. It is thought that her worship was widespread even in the pre-dynastic period because she appears on the Narmer palette. However, some scholars suggest that the cow-headed goddess depicted on the palette is in fact Bat or even Narmer himself. There is no doubt that her worship was well established by the Old Kingdom as she appears with Bast in the Valley Temple of Khafra at Giza. Hathor represents Upper Egypt and Bast represents Lower Egypt. She was originally a personification of the Milky Way, which was considered to be the milk that flowed from the udders of a heavenly cow. As time passed, Hathor absorbed the attributes of many other goddesses but also became more closely associated with Isis, who to some degree usurped her position as the most popular and powerful goddess. Yet, Hathor remained popular throughout Egyptian history. More festivals were dedicated to her and more children were named after her than any other god or goddess of ancient Egypt. Her worship was not confined to Egypt and Nubia. She was worshipped throughout Semitic West Asia, Ethiopian, Somalia, and Libya, but was particularly venerated in the city of Byblos. Hathor was a sky goddess, known as Lady of Stars, and Sovereign of Stars, and linked to Sirius. Her birthday was celebrated on the day that Sirius first rose in the sky. By the Ptolemaic period, she was known as the goddess of Hathor, the third month of the Egyptian calendar. As the mistress of heaven, Hathor was associated with Nut, Mut and the queen. While as the celestial nurse, she nursed the pharaoh in the guise of a cow or as a sycamore fig. As the mother of mothers, she was the goddess of women, fertility, children and childbirth. She had power over anything having to do with women, from problems with conception or childbirth, to health and beauty, to matters of the heart. Yet, she was not exclusively worshipped by women and, unlike the other gods and goddesses, she had both male and female priests. Hathor was the goddess of beauty and patron of the cosmetic arts. Her traditional votive offering was 2 mirrors and she was often depicted on mirrors and cosmetic palettes. Yet, she was not considered to be vain or shallow, rather she was assured of her own beauty and goodness and loved beautiful and good things. She was known as the Mistress of Life, and was seen as the embodiment of joy, love, romance, perfume, dance, music, and alcohol. Hathor was especially connected with the fragrance of myrrh incense, which was considered to be very precious and to embody all of the finer qualities of the female sex. Hathor was associated with turquoise, malachite, gold, and copper. As the mistress of turquoise, and the Lady of Malachite, she was the patron of miners and the goddess of the Sinai Peninsula. The Egyptians used eye makeup made from ground malachite which had a protective function which was attributed to Hathor. She was the patron of dancers and was associated with percussive music, particularly the sistrum. She was also associated with the Menet necklace and was often known as the Great Menet. Many of her priests were artisans, musicians, and dancers who added to the quality of life of the Egyptians and worshipped her by expressing their artistic natures. Hathor was the incarnation of dance and sexuality and was given the epithet, Hand of God, and Lady of the Vulva. One myth tells that Ra had become so despondent that he refused to speak to anyone. Hathor danced before him, exposing her private parts, which caused him to laugh out loud and return to good spirits. As the Lady of the West, and the Lady of the Southern Sycamore, she protected and assisted the dead on their final journey. Trees were not commonplace in ancient Egypt, and their shade was welcomed by the living and the dead alike. She was sometimes depicted as handing out water to the deceased from a sycamore tree, and according to myth, She used the milk from the sycamore tree to restore sight to Horus, who had been blinded by Set. Because of her role in helping the dead, she often appears on sarcophagi with Nut. She occasionally took the form of the 7 Hathors, who were associated with fate and fortune-telling. It was thought that the 7 Hathors knew the length of every child's life from the day it was born and questioned the dead souls as they traveled to the land of the dead. Her priests could read the fortune of a newborn child, and act as oracles to explain the dreams of the people. People would travel for miles to beseech the goddess for protection, assistance, and inspiration. The 7 Hathors were worshipped in 7 cities: Wasit, Eunu, Aphroditopolis, Sinai, Momemphis, Heracleopolis, and Keset. They may have been linked to the constellations Pleiades. Hathor was also a goddess of destruction in her role as the Eye of Ra, defender of the sun god. According to legend, people started to criticize Ra when he ruled as pharaoh. Ra decided to send his eye against them. She began to slaughter people by the hundred. When Ra relented and asked her to stop, she refused as she was in a bloodlust. The only way to stop the slaughter was to color beer red and pour the mixture over the killing fields. When she drank the beer, she became drunk and drowsy, and slept for 3 days. When she awoke with a hangover, she had no taste for human flesh and mankind was saved. Ra renamed her Hathor and she became a goddess of love and happiness. As a result, soldiers also prayed to Hathor, Sekhmet, to give them her strength and focus in battle. Her husband Horus the Elder was associated with the pharaoh, so Hathor was associated with the queen. Her name is translated as the House of Horus, which refers both to the sky and to the royal family. She had a son named Ihy with Horus Bedti, and the 3 were worshipped at Dendera. However, her family relationships became increasingly confusing as time passed. She was probably first considered to be the wife of Horus the Elder and the daughter of Ra. But when Ra and Horus were linked as the composite deity Re-Horikati, Hathor became both the wife and the daughter of Ra. This strengthened her association with Isis, who was the mother of Horus the child by Osiris. In Hermopolis, Thoth was the foremost god, and Hathor was considered to be his wife and the mother of Re-Herakti. Of course, Thoth already had a wife, Seshat, so Hathor absorbed her role, including acting as a witness at the judgment of the dead. Her role in welcoming the dead gained her a further husband, Nehebkau. Then when Ra and Amun merged, Hathor became seen as the wife of Sobek, who was considered to be an aspect of Amun-Ra. Yet Sobek was also associated with Seth, the enemy of Horus. She took the form of a woman, goose, cat, lion, malachite, sycamore fig, to name but a few. However, Hathor's most famous manifestation is as a cow, and even when she appears as a woman she has either the ears of a cow, or a pair of elegant horns. When she is depicted as entirely a cow, she always has beautifully painted eyes and wears a red sun disk between her horns. She was often depicted in red, though her sacred color is turquoise. It is also interesting to note that only she and the dwarf god Bes were ever depicted in portrait. Isis borrowed many of her functions and adapted her iconography to the extent that it is often difficult to be sure which of the 2 goddesses is depicted. However, the 2 deities were not the same. Isis was in many ways a more complex deity who suffered the death of her husband and had to fight to protect her infant son, so she understood the trials and tribulations of the people and could relate to them. Hathor, on the other hand, was the embodiment of power and success and did not experience doubts. While Isis was merciful, Hathor was single-minded in pursuit of her goals. When she took the form of Sekhmet, she did not take pity on the people and even refused to stop killing when ordered to do so.